The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Marcus Williams adjusted his Royal Guard uniform one last time. His polished boots clicked against the marble floor as he entered the building, shoulders squared despite the knot in his stomach. Today was different from his usual duties protecting visiting dignitaries at the embassy. Today he was here as a defendant. Judge Patricia Henderson looked up from her paperwork as the bailiff called the case. She had presided over countless traffic violations, but something about this particular case caught her attention. The defendant wasn't the typical speedster or reckless driver she usually saw. Marcus stood at attention, his military bearing evident even in civilian court. "Mr. Williams," Judge Henderson began, her voice carrying the authority of 20 years on the bench, "you're charged with reckless driving and failure to yield. How do you plead?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I plead not guilty. However, I'd like to represent myself and present evidence that the charges are based on an incorrect interpretation of traffic law." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor, David Chen, raised an eyebrow. Self-representation was common, but rarely did defendants claim the charges themselves were legally flawed. Judge Henderson leaned forward. "Mr. Williams, while you have the right to represent yourself, I strongly advise seeking legal counsel. Traffic law can be more complex than it appears." "I understand, Your Honor," Marcus replied respectfully, "but I've studied the relevant statutes extensively." The arresting officer cited Vehicle Code Section 21801, which requires drivers to yield when making left turns. However, this section contains an exception under subsection C that wasn't considered during the citation process. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant was clearly at fault. Officer Rodriguez's report states that Mr. Williams made an unsafe left turn, causing the other driver to brake suddenly." Marcus pulled out a folder from his briefcase. "Your Honor, may I present evidence? I have photographs of the intersection, traffic light timing records from the city, and a detailed analysis of the sight lines at the location where the incident occurred." Judge Henderson was surprised by the defendant's preparation. Most self-represented individuals came with little more than their version of events. "Proceed, Mr. Williams." Marcus walked to the evidence table with confidence. "The intersection in question has a delayed green arrow system. According to the traffic department's own records, which I obtained through a public information request, the left turn arrow appears 4 seconds after opposing traffic receives a red light. During those 4 seconds, drivers making left turns have absolute right-of-way." He placed several photographs on the table. These images show the intersection from multiple angles. The opposing driver's view of the left turn lane is obstructed by a delivery truck that was parked legally in the adjacent space. The other driver couldn't see vehicles waiting to turn left until after entering the intersection. The prosecutor examined the photos, his confident expression beginning to waver. "Your Honor, regardless of these details, the fact remains that an accident nearly occurred." "Actually," Marcus continued, "that brings me to my next point. The charging statute requires proof of reckless behavior, defined as willful disregard for safety. My actions were based on a reasonable interpretation of traffic signals and right-of-way laws. I waited for the protected left turn signal, checked for oncoming traffic, and proceeded when legally permitted." Judge Henderson studied the photographs and documents Marcus had presented. His preparation was more thorough than many licensed attorneys who appeared in her courtroom. "Mr. Williams, where did you acquire this knowledge of traffic law?" Marcus straightened. "I've been studying law during my off-duty hours, Your Honor. It started as personal interest, but I've completed several legal research courses online. I believe in understanding the laws I'm expected to follow as a citizen and as a member of the Royal Guard." The judge was impressed despite herself. "And you obtained these traffic records independently?" "Yes, Your Honor. I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the City Traffic Department. They were very helpful in providing the signal timing data and intersection design specifications." Prosecutor Chen shifted uncomfortably. The case he'd expected to be straightforward was becoming complicated. "Your Honor, I'd like to request a brief recess to review the defendant's evidence." "Granted," Judge Henderson said. 15-minute recess. During the break, Marcus remained seated, reviewing his notes. Several court observers approached him, curious about his background. One elderly gentleman introduced himself as Attorney Robert Mason. "Son," Mason said, "I've been practicing law for 40 years, and I've rarely seen such thorough preparation from anyone, let alone a pro se defendant. Have you considered law school? Marcus smiled modestly. I've thought about it, sir, but my duties with the Royal Guard keep me quite busy. When court resumed, Prosecutor Chen looked less confident than before. Your Honor, after reviewing the defendant's evidence, the state acknowledges that this case presents some complexities we hadn't initially considered. Judge Henderson turned to Marcus. Mr. Williams, I'm curious about your analysis. Can you walk the court through your interpretation of the relevant statutes? Marcus stood and approached the podium with his notes. Certainly, Your Honor. The key issue is the intersection of Vehicle Code Section 21801 with Section 21802, which addresses protected turn signals. When these sections are read together, they create a clear hierarchy of right-of-way that wasn't properly applied in this case. Judge Henderson found herself leaning forward as Marcus continued his explanation. His understanding of legal precedent was remarkable for someone without formal legal training. She had seen countless attorneys stumble through similar arguments with far less clarity. Furthermore, Marcus continued, consulting his notes, the case of Richardson versus State Traffic. Authority established that drivers following protected signal phases cannot be held liable for reckless driving unless their actions exceed the scope of the signal's protection. In my situation, I remained within the designated turn lane, maintained appropriate speed, and yielded to pedestrians as required. Prosecutor Chen stood up. Your Honor, even accepting the defendant's interpretation, there's still the matter of the near collision with Mr. Patterson's vehicle. Marcus nodded respectfully toward the prosecutor. I appreciate Mr. Chen raising that point. I'd like to call attention to the police report's description of events. He held up a document. Officer Rodriguez states that Mr. Patterson braked suddenly upon seeing the defendant's vehicle. This language is significant because it suggests Mr. Patterson was able to avoid any contact, indicating that my turn was executed with adequate clearance. The judge examined the police report Marcus referenced. Mr. Williams, you seem to have studied this report quite thoroughly. Did you identify any other relevant details? Yes, Your Honor. Officer Rodriguez arrived approximately 8 minutes after the incident. His report is based entirely on statements from Mr. Patterson and myself, plus physical evidence at the scene. Importantly, there are no skid marks mentioned in the report, which would typically be present if emergency braking had actually occurred. Attorney Mason, still observing from the gallery, whispered to his colleague, "This young man is dissecting the case better than most seasoned lawyers." Judge Henderson was becoming increasingly intrigued by Marcus's analytical approach. Mr. Williams, you mentioned studying legal research courses. Can you tell the court more about your educational background? Marcus maintained his respectful posture. Your Honor, I completed my bachelor's degree in criminal justice while serving in the military before joining the Royal Guard. During my current position, I've taken continuing education courses in constitutional law, evidence analysis, and legal research methodology through the State University's online program. The prosecutor was clearly struggling with the direction of the case. Your Honor, while the defendant's preparation is admirable, we can't lose sight of the fact that Mr. Patterson was genuinely concerned for his safety during this incident. That's a valid point, Marcus acknowledged. However, subjective fear doesn't establish objective recklessness under the law. The standard requires proof that a reasonable person would consider the defendant's actions dangerous. Given that I followed all applicable traffic laws and signal phases, a reasonable person would likely conclude that my actions were appropriate. Judge Henderson made a note on her legal pad. Mr. Williams, you've presented a compelling argument about the legal standards involved. Have you researched any cases similar to yours? Marcus brightened. Actually, yes, Your Honor. I found 3 relevant cases from our state's appellate courts. In State v. Morrison, the court ruled that drivers cannot be convicted of reckless driving for following traffic control devices, even if other drivers misinterpret the signals. In City v. Ahmed, the appellate court overturned a reckless driving conviction, where the defendant's actions were consistent with reasonable interpretation of traffic laws. He paused to reference his notes. Most significantly, in State v. Rodriguez, the court established that traffic violations require proof of actual negligence, not merely the occurrence of a near-miss incident. The courtroom had grown quiet as observers realized they were witnessing something unusual. Marcus wasn't just defending himself. He was providing a masterclass in traffic law analysis. Prosecutor Chen requested another brief consultation with his notes. Judge Henderson granted it, using the time to study Marcus's evidence more carefully. The photographs clearly showed the sightline issues he had described. The traffic timing records supported his claims about the protected left turn phase. When proceedings resumed, the prosecutor's approach had shifted noticeably. Your Honor, given the defendant's thorough analysis and the complexities he's raised regarding the intersection design, the state would be willing to consider reducing the charges to a simple citation for improper lane change. Marcus respectfully interjected. Your Honor, with respect to the prosecutor's offer, I believe the evidence shows that no violation occurred at all. The lane change charge would be equally inappropriate, as I remained in the designated left turn lane throughout the maneuver. Judge Henderson was facing a decision she hadn't anticipated when the day began. The defendant had presented a more convincing legal argument than many attorneys who appeared before her. His research was thorough, his citations were accurate, and his analysis was logically sound. Mr. Williams, she said, in my years on the bench, I've rarely encountered such thorough preparation from any defendant, represented or otherwise. Your understanding of the relevant law is impressive. The courtroom was silent as everyone waited for her decision. Marcus remained standing at attention, his military bearing unchanged despite the stress of the situation. However, the judge continued, I want to understand something else. You mentioned your duties with the Royal Guard. How does someone with your obvious legal aptitude end up in that position, rather than practicing law? Marcus smiled slightly. Your Honor, serving as a Royal Guard has been an honor. The position requires understanding of diplomatic protocol, security law, and international relations. It's actually complemented my legal studies quite well. But I admit that days like today make me wonder if I should be doing more with my legal knowledge. Judge Henderson set down her pen and looked directly at Marcus. The courtroom remained silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Mr. Williams, based on your presentation of evidence and analysis of applicable statutes, I find that the prosecution has failed to meet its burden of proof for reckless driving. The evidence clearly supports your interpretation of traffic signals and right-of-way laws. She paused, letting her words sink in. Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted in quiet murmurs. Prosecutor Chen gathered his papers, clearly frustrated but professional in defeat. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief washing over his face for the first time that day. But Judge Henderson wasn't finished. Mr. Williams, please remain for a moment. I'd like to speak with you. As the courtroom cleared, Attorney Mason approached Marcus. Son, that was exceptional work. Here's my card. I'd very much like to discuss some opportunities with you. Marcus accepted the card gratefully, but his attention remained on Judge Henderson, who was organizing her papers at the bench. Your Honor, Marcus approached respectfully. Judge Henderson looked up. Mr. Williams, I've been presiding over this court for 20 years. I've seen thousands of cases, worked with hundreds of attorneys. What you demonstrated today was truly remarkable. Thank you, Your Honor. I was nervous about representing myself, but I felt confident in my research. That's exactly what I want to discuss. Judge Henderson stood up. Have you ever considered that your current career might be limiting your potential? The legal analysis you presented today was graduate-level work. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, I appreciate the compliment, but I have responsibilities. The Royal Guard position provides stability, and I have family obligations. I understand those concerns, Judge Henderson said. But consider this. How many people could have analyzed that case the way you did? How many defendants walk into my courtroom with detailed traffic engineering reports and appellate court citations? She gathered her files. Mr. Williams, I'd like you to meet someone. My colleague, Judge Elizabeth Carr, oversees our court's legal aid program. We're always looking for qualified individuals to help citizens who can't afford representation. Marcus's interest was clearly piqued. That sounds meaningful, Your Honor. It is. And it might be a way for you to use your legal skills while maintaining your current position. Would you be willing to volunteer a few hours per week? I'd be very interested in learning more about that opportunity. Judge Henderson smiled. Excellent. I'll arrange a meeting. But Marcus, may I call you Marcus? I think you should seriously consider law school. The court system needs people with your analytical skills and dedication. Later that evening, Marcus returned to his small apartment, still processing the day's events. He had expected to pay a fine and perhaps face points on his license. Instead, He had successfully defended himself and received multiple offers for legal work. His phone rang. It was his sister Diana calling from across town. "Marcus, how did court go? Please tell me you didn't end up with a huge fine." "Actually, Di, the case was dismissed completely." "What? How did that happen?" Marcus sat down on his couch, still holding Attorney Mason's business card. "I think I might be better at this legal stuff than I realized." Over the next few days, Marcus found himself thinking constantly about Judge Henderson's words. He had always enjoyed his legal studies, but had never considered them more than an intellectual hobby. The Royal Guard position was secure, respected, and provided good benefits. Why risk that stability for something uncertain? The following week, Marcus met with Judge Carr about the legal aid volunteer position. Her office was filled with law books and case files, but also with thank you letters from clients who had received help through the program. "Judge Henderson spoke very highly of your courtroom presentation," Judge Carr began. "She said you analyzed traffic law better than most attorneys who appear before her. I appreciate her confidence. Your Honor, I'm genuinely interested in helping people navigate the legal system." Judge Carr pulled out a folder. "Our legal aid clinic serves people who can't afford attorneys for basic legal issues. Traffic violations, small claims disputes, landlord-tenant problems. We need volunteers who can help with research, document preparation, and basic legal advice." That sounds exactly like something I'd enjoy doing. The time commitment is flexible. Evening and weekend hours work best for most of our clients anyway. Judge Carr opened the folder. "But Marcus, can I ask you something? Why haven't you pursued law as a career? Your background suggests you'd be very successful." It was the same question Judge Henderson had posed, and Marcus still wasn't sure how to answer it. "I suppose I never thought of myself as lawyer material. The Royal Guard position fell into place after my military service, and it's been comfortable." "Comfortable isn't the same as fulfilling," Judge Carr observed. "Have you considered that you might be able to help more people as an attorney than as a guard?" Marcus left the meeting with paperwork to begin volunteering and more questions about his future than he'd ever had before. That weekend, he found himself researching law school admissions requirements, LSAT preparation courses, and part-time degree programs. His Royal Guard duties suddenly felt different. When he stood at attention during diplomatic receptions, his mind wandered to legal concepts and case studies. During security briefings, he found himself analyzing policies from a legal perspective rather than just following procedures. 2 weeks into his volunteer work at the legal aid clinic, Marcus encountered a case that would change everything. A young mother named Sarah Martinez came in desperately seeking help with an eviction notice she couldn't understand. Sarah Martinez sat across from Marcus at the legal aid clinic, her hands shaking as she held the eviction notice. Her 8-year-old daughter, Sophia, colored quietly in a chair nearby while her mother tried to explain her situation. "Mr. Williams, I don't understand any of this legal language," Sarah said, tears forming in her eyes. "They're saying I have to leave my apartment in 10 days, but I've been paying rent." "I have receipts." Marcus studied the eviction notice carefully. Something about the language seemed off to him. He had spent the previous evening studying landlord-tenant law in preparation for cases like this. "Mrs. Martinez, this notice cites non-payment of rent, but you say you've been paying. Can you show me your receipts?" Sarah pulled out a worn envelope filled with money order stubs and handwritten receipts. "I pay Mr. Thompson every month. He owns the building, but he only gives me these handwritten receipts." Marcus examined the receipts. They were informal, lacking many details typically found in proper rent documentation. More concerning, the amounts varied slightly from month to month. "Mrs. Martinez, what does your lease agreement say about rent amount and due dates?" Sarah looked confused. "I don't have a lease agreement. Mr. Thompson said we didn't need one since I was paying month to month." Red flags immediately went up in Marcus's mind. He had studied enough housing law to know that operating without proper documentation often led to exactly these kinds of disputes. "Let me ask you something else," Marcus said gently. "Have there been any problems with your apartment? Repairs needed? Issues with utilities?" "Oh yes," Sarah replied. "The heating hasn't worked properly all winter, and there's a leak in the bathroom ceiling. I've asked Mr. Thompson to fix these things many times, but he keeps saying he'll get to it later." Marcus was beginning to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about late rent. This appeared to be a retaliatory eviction. He had read about these cases where landlords tried to remove tenants who complained about habitability issues. Mrs. Martinez, have you documented your requests for repairs? Do you have any written communication with Mr. Thompson about these issues?
I have some text messages, Sarah said, pulling out her phone.
And I called the city's housing inspector last month about the heating. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. If there was a housing inspection report documenting habitability violations, this case could be much stronger than it initially appeared. Did the inspector find any violations? Yes, he said the heating system was inadequate and the leak created potential mold hazards. He gave Mr. Thompson a list of things to fix. Marcus made detailed notes. Mrs. Martinez, I think you may have a strong defense against this eviction. In fact, you might have grounds for a counterclaim. What does that mean? It means that instead of just fighting the eviction, we might be able to argue that Mr. Thompson is violating his obligations as a landlord. Under state law, landlords cannot retaliate against tenants for reporting housing violations. For the first time since entering the clinic, Sarah looked hopeful. Really? You think I can stay in my apartment? I think we need to gather more evidence, but yes, I believe you have a strong case. Marcus paused. However, I should be clear about something. I'm a volunteer here, not a licensed attorney. For a case this complex, we'll need to get you connected with a qualified lawyer. Marcus spent the next hour helping Sarah organize her documentation and preparing a timeline of events. The pattern was clear. After Sarah contacted the housing inspector, Mr. Thompson had suddenly become aggressive about minor issues with rent timing, then filed for eviction when the city ordered him to make repairs. After Sarah left with a list of additional documents to gather, Marcus found himself energized in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The analytical challenge of the case, combined with the opportunity to help someone in genuine need, felt incredibly fulfilling. That evening, he called Judge Henderson's chambers and left a message requesting a brief meeting. She called back the next morning. Marcus, how is the volunteer work going? Your Honor, I'm loving it. But I've encountered a case that's made me think seriously about what you said regarding law school. Tell me about it, Marcus. Describe Sarah Martinez's situation and his analysis of the retaliatory eviction angle. Judge Henderson listened intently. Marcus, that's exactly the kind of thinking that makes good lawyers great. You're not just seeing the surface issue, you're understanding the broader legal context. The thing is, Your Honor, I keep thinking about how many people like Sarah need help with these issues, and I keep wondering if I could do more good as an attorney than as a royal guard. Have you looked into law school options? I've been researching part-time programs. There's a respected evening program at State University that would allow me to keep working. But the financial commitment is significant, and there's no guarantee of success. Judge Henderson was quiet for a moment. Marcus, can I make a suggestion? Why don't you take the LSAT? It's offered several times a year, and scoring well would give you a better sense of your aptitude for law school. It might help you make a more informed decision. That's actually a great idea. Your Honor, taking the test doesn't commit me to anything, but it would give me real data about my chances of success. Exactly. And Marcus, regardless of what you decide about law school, I hope you'll continue volunteering at the clinic. You have a gift for legal analysis that shouldn't be wasted. Over the following weeks, Marcus threw himself into LSAT preparation while continuing his Royal Guard duties and volunteer work. He studied logic games during breaks at the embassy. He practiced reading comprehension during quiet security shifts. He worked through analytical reasoning problems late into the night. The more he studied, the more convinced he became that law was his true calling. The structured thinking required for the LSAT felt natural to him. The logical frameworks that challenged other test takers seemed intuitive. Meanwhile, Sarah Martinez's case was progressing well. Marcus had connected her with attorney Mason, who had agreed to take the case pro bono after reviewing Marcus's initial analysis. Son, attorney Mason told Marcus during a case strategy meeting, your legal instincts are remarkable. You identified issues I might have missed on first review. Have you given more thought to law school? I'm taking the LSAT next month, Marcus replied. We'll see how that goes. I have a feeling you're going to surprise yourself, Mason said with a smile. The morning of the LSAT, Marcus woke before his alarm. He had been dreaming about logic games and legal reasoning problems. After months of preparation while balancing his Royal Guard duties and volunteer work, test day had finally arrived. At the testing center, Marcus looked around at his fellow test takers. Most appeared to be traditional college students, at least 10 years younger than him. He wondered if he was making a mistake, throwing away a stable career for an uncertain dream. The test began, and Marcus felt his months of preparation take over. The logical reasoning questions that had initially seemed impossible now felt like familiar puzzles. The reading comprehension passages about legal theory and scientific research engaged his analytical mind. Even the dreaded logic game section, which had frustrated him early in his studies, now felt manageable. When the final section ended, Marcus felt cautiously optimistic. He had finished every question and felt confident about most of his answers. Now came the hardest part, waiting for results. 3 weeks later, Marcus was working a quiet evening shift at the embassy when his phone buzzed with an email notification. His LSAT score was available. His hands trembled slightly as he logged into the testing website. The score that appeared on his screen made him read it twice to make sure he wasn't imagining things. 168 out of 180. According to the percentile chart, he had scored better than 95% of test takers. Marcus sat in stunned silence. He had hoped for a respectable score that might get him into a decent law school. This score would likely get him into some of the best programs in the country. His phone rang immediately. It was his sister Diana. "Marcus, how did you do?" "I've been nervous about it all day. Dee, I can hardly believe it. I scored 168. Is that good? I don't know anything about LSAT scores." "It's really good, Di. Really, really good." Over the next few days, Marcus found himself flooded with law school recruitment materials. Admissions counselors from top-tier schools called to discuss their programs. Schools he had never dreamed of attending were actively courting him. But the most meaningful call came from Judge Henderson. "Marcus, I heard through the grapevine about your LSAT score. Congratulations, that's an outstanding achievement." "Thank you." "Your Honor, I'm still processing it all. Have you made any decisions about applications?" "I'm looking at several schools. The evening program at State University still appeals to me because I could keep working. But now I'm also considering some full-time programs." "Marcus, may I give you some advice? Don't let financial concerns force you into a part-time program if you're capable of succeeding in a more rigorous full-time environment. With your score, you'll likely qualify for significant scholarships." That weekend, Marcus had lunch with attorney Mason to discuss his options. Mason had become not just a mentor but a friend over the months they had worked together on cases. "Son, with a 168 LSAT and your unique background, you could probably get into any law school in the country. Have you considered the top-tier schools? I've looked at them, but the costs seem astronomical, even with potential scholarships." "Marcus, let me tell you something about the legal profession. Where you go to school opens certain doors. With your analytical abilities and your score, you could potentially earn a scholarship to a top school that would cost you less than paying full tuition at a lower-ranked institution." Mason paused to take a sip of coffee. "More importantly, the connections and opportunities available at elite schools could transform not just your career, but your ability to help people like Sarah Martinez." The mention of Sarah reminded Marcus why he had become interested in law in the first place. Her case had been successfully resolved, with Mr. Thompson not only dropping the eviction but also agreeing to make necessary repairs and pay Sarah's legal costs. "You're right," Marcus said. "I got into this because I wanted to help people. If going to a better school gives me more tools to do that, I should at least explore the options." That evening, Marcus called his parents to discuss his decision. His father, a retired mechanic, and his mother, a school secretary, had always been proud of his military service and Royal Guard position. "Marcus," his mother said, "we don't know much about law school, but we know you. If this is what you feel called to do, we support you completely." His father, always practical, asked the tough questions. "Son, you have a good job with good benefits. Are you sure you want to give that up for something uncertain?"
"Dad, I've been thinking about that a lot."
"The Royal Guard position has been good to me, but I don't think it's using my best abilities. These past months at the legal clinic have shown me what I'm really capable of." Over the following weeks, Marcus submitted applications to 8 law schools, ranging from the local part-time program to Harvard and Yale. The application essays were challenging, but allowed him to tell his unique story. From military service to Royal Guard to legal aid volunteer, the personal statement that emerged was compelling. Marcus wrote about discovering his legal aptitude through defending himself in traffic court, about finding his passion through helping vulnerable clients at the legal clinic, and about his commitment to using law as a tool for justice rather than just personal advancement. In January, acceptance letters began arriving. First came State University's part-time program, offering him a partial scholarship. Then came acceptances from several regional schools with generous financial aid packages. But the letter that changed everything arrived on a Thursday morning. Harvard Law School had not only accepted him, but offered a full scholarship covering tuition and living expenses. The accompanying note from the admissions committee praised his unique background and demonstrated commitment to public service. Marcus stared at the letter in disbelief. Harvard Law School. Full scholarship. It seemed impossible that the Royal Guard who had represented himself in traffic court less than a year ago was now being recruited by one of the most prestigious law schools in the world. That afternoon, he requested a meeting with his supervisor at the Royal Guard. Captain Johnson had been a mentor during Marcus's years of service. "Sir, I need to discuss a potential career change with you." Captain Johnson looked up from his paperwork. "Williams, you're one of my best guards. Please tell me you're not leaving for another security position." "No, sir. Actually, I've been accepted to Harvard Law School." Captain Johnson set down his pen and stared at Marcus. "Harvard Law School? How did that happen?" Marcus spent the next hour explaining his journey to Captain Johnson, from the traffic court case through his volunteer work at the legal aid clinic to his LSAT success. Captain Johnson listened with growing amazement. "Williams, I always knew you were sharp, but this is extraordinary. Harvard Law School doesn't hand out full scholarships to just anyone. Sir, I wanted to speak with you personally because the Royal Guard has meant a lot to me. This unit gave me stability and purpose when I needed it most." Captain Johnson leaned back in his chair. "Marcus, can I tell you something? In my 20 years leading this unit, I've watched good people stay in positions that didn't challenge them because they were comfortable. You have an opportunity that most people only dream about. If you don't take it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." The conversation with Captain Johnson removed Marcus's last doubts. He accepted Harvard's offer and began preparing for the most significant transition of his life. Word of Marcus's acceptance spread quickly through the courthouse where he volunteered. Judge Henderson organized a small celebration in her chambers, inviting the legal aid clinic staff and several attorneys who had worked with Marcus. "Ladies and gentlemen," Judge Henderson addressed the group, "we're here to celebrate someone who proves that legal talent can emerge in the most unexpected places. Marcus Williams defended himself in my courtroom less than a year ago. Today he's heading to Harvard Law School." Attorney Mason raised his glass. "To Marcus, who reminds us all that dedication and intelligence can overcome any background. Harvard is lucky to have him." As the evening wound down, Judge Henderson pulled Marcus aside. "Marcus, I want you to remember something during your time at Harvard. You're not going there just to become successful. You're going there to become the kind of lawyer who can help people like Sarah Martinez on a much larger scale. I won't forget that. Your Honor, everything started in your courtroom. Sarah Martinez attended the gathering with her daughter Sophia. The eviction case had been resolved months ago, and Sarah had since found better housing with Marcus's help navigating the application process." "Mr. Williams," Sarah said, "I don't really understand what Harvard Law School is, but Sophia and I wanted to thank you. You saved our home." Sophia, now 9 years old, handed Marcus a drawing she had made. It showed a man in a suit standing in front of a large building with court written above the door. "That's you helping people," Sophia explained. Marcus knelt down to Sophia's level. "Sophia, you know what? I'm going to keep this drawing with me at law school. It'll remind me why I'm there." 3 months later, Marcus walked across Harvard Law School's campus for the first time as a student. The imposing brick buildings and manicured lawns were a far cry from the military bases and embassy compounds where he had spent his career. His first-year classes were challenging but exhilarating. Constitutional law, contracts, torts, civil procedure, subjects he had studied independently were now being explored in depth with brilliant professors and motivated classmates. What surprised Marcus most was how his unique background enhanced his legal education. His military experience provided practical insights into constitutional questions about government power. His Royal Guard service gave him understanding of international law concepts that many classmates found abstract. but it was his legal aid clinic experience that set him apart most clearly. While his classmates were learning to think like lawyers, Marcus already understood how law affected real people in real situations. During his first semester, Marcus's constitutional law professor, Dr. Rebecca Chen, called on him to analyze a Fourth Amendment case about government searches. "Mr. Williams, you have experience in security operations. How do you think the court should balance public safety concerns against privacy rights in this case?" Marcus's answer drew from his Royal Guard experience, his study of constitutional principles, and his understanding of how police searches affected people like Sarah Martinez. His response was so thoughtful that Professor Chen used it as the foundation for the rest of the class discussion. After class, a classmate named Jennifer approached him. "Marcus, that was incredible. How do you think about these issues so practically while the rest of us are still struggling with basic concepts?" "I guess I've seen how these laws actually work in people's lives," Marcus replied. "It makes the theoretical discussions more meaningful." By winter break of his first year, Marcus had emerged as one of the top students in his class. But more importantly, he had found his community among classmates who shared his commitment to public service law. He spent winter break back home, visiting Judge Henderson and the legal aid clinic where his journey had begun. "Marcus," Judge Henderson said, "I hear you're excelling at Harvard. Are you planning to stay in public interest law?" "Absolutely, Your Honor. I'm already looking at summer internships with legal aid organizations and public defender offices. Harvard has incredible opportunities for public service work." "I'm glad to hear that. The legal profession needs people who remember why law matters to ordinary people." That spring, Marcus landed a summer internship with a prestigious public interest law firm in Boston that specialized in housing rights and tenant advocacy. His supervisor quickly recognized his unique combination of academic excellence and practical experience. "Marcus," his supervisor told him midway through the summer, "you have something that's rare in this field. You understand legal theory at the highest level, but you also understand how law affects people's daily lives. That combination is going to make you exceptionally effective." As Marcus completed his first year at Harvard Law School, he often thought back to that morning in Judge Henderson's courtroom, when he had nervously defended himself against a traffic citation. He had walked into court as a Royal Guard with a legal hobby. He was emerging as a future lawyer with the skills and passion to make a real difference in people's lives. The judge who had fined him that morning had actually discovered something far more valuable than a traffic violation. She had discovered a legal mind that would go on to champion justice for those who needed it most. Standing in Harvard Yard on graduation day 3 years later, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him there. From defending himself in traffic court to earning his law degree from one of the world's most prestigious institutions, his path had been unexpected but meaningful. Sarah Martinez and her daughter Sophia were in the audience, along with Judge Henderson, Attorney Mason, and Captain Johnson. They represented the community that had supported his transformation and the people he was committed to serving as a lawyer. As Marcus walked across the stage to receive his diploma, he knew that his real work was just beginning. The legal genius that Judge Henderson had discovered in her courtroom was ready to take on the world.